The vote was unanimous and the decision was final. Every species on the Galactic Council had raised their appendages, tentacles, or claws in agreement. Humanity had to go. They were too dangerous, too unpredictable, and far too ambitious for a species that had only discovered the light travel 300 years ago. The elder races had watched the humans spread across 47 worlds in what felt like the blink of an eye. They had seen human ships venture into regions of space that other species avoided. They had witnessed human scientists crack problems that had puzzled alien civilizations for millennia, and they were afraid. Admiral stood on the bridge of the starship and watched the holographic display with tired eyes. The alien armada surrounded Earth like a swarm of metal insects, warships with their sleek purple hulls, destroyers bristling with weapons, carriers that could hold thousands of fighter craft. A dozen other species had contributed vessels to this grand coalition, all of them united by a single purpose: the containment of humanity. Commander Brooks walked up beside her and cleared his throat. He was a young man with brown hair and worried eyes. He had served under for 7 years and had never seen her look so defeated. "The last civilian transports have departed from New Geneva," he said quietly. "All colonies are reporting successful evacuations. Only military personnel remain on the surface." Slowly, without taking her eyes off the display, "And our orders from High Command. Full compliance, no resistance. We are to surrender all vessels and weapons and board the transport ships for relocation." The words hung in the air between them. Had spent her entire adult life defending humanity's place among the stars. She had fought pirates and smugglers and hostile alien factions. She had negotiated treaties and trade agreements. She had believed with all her heart that humanity belonged out here in the vast darkness between worlds, and now she was being told to give it all up without a fight. "It goes against everything I believe," she said softly. "Every instinct tells me to resist, to fight, to show them that humanity will not be pushed aside." Waited, he knew there was more coming. "But High Command is right," continued. "If we fight, we die, all of us, every man, woman, and child. The Coalition has made it clear that resistance will be met with total annihilation. They are not bluffing. I have seen their weapons. I have seen their numbers. We cannot win this war." She finally turned to face him. There were tears in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. "So we comply, we survive, we go to whatever prison world they have chosen for us, and we wait." "Wait for what?" asked. Almost smiled. "For them to realize what they have done." The relocation took 6 months. Human ships carried human passengers away from human worlds. Families said goodbye to homes they had built over generations. Scientists abandoned laboratories filled with ongoing experiments. Artists left behind studios and galleries and concert halls. Farmers walked away from fields they had cultivated with their own hands. Everywhere across human space, the story was the same. People packed what they could carry and boarded the transports and tried not to look back. The destination was a world called Seven. It sat at the very edge of the galaxy, far from any trade routes or strategic resources. The planet was habitable but unremarkable. It had breathable air and drinkable water and soil that could grow crops. It had no advanced technology and no means of reaching the stars. It was, in every way that mattered, a cage. Was among the last to leave Earth. She stood on a hill overlooking the city of Chicago and watched the sun set over the empty streets. No lights flickered on as darkness fell. No vehicles moved along the highways. No voices echoed from the buildings. The city that had once housed millions was now home to nothing but silence. An alien shuttle descended from the sky and landed nearby. An official emerged, his purple scales shimmering in the fading light. His name was Ambassador, and he had been assigned to oversee the final stages of the evacuation. "Admiral," he said in his hissing voice, "your transport is ready. You are the last human on this continent." Did not turn around. This was my grandmother's city. She used to tell me stories about walking these streets as a child, about the music and the food and the laughter, about how alive everything felt. Shifted uncomfortably. He had not expected sentimentality from a military officer. "The Council has been generous," he said. "Your species will be allowed to live in peace on Seven. You will have everything you need to survive." Many on the Council argued for harsher measures. Now did turn. Her eyes were hard and cold. "Generous," she repeated. "You call this generous? You are taking everything from us, our history, our achievements, our future. You are reducing the human race to farmers and on a backwater world because you are afraid of what we might become." "You were expanding too quickly," said. "You were developing technologies that threatened the balance of power. You were making the elder races uncomfortable. We were growing, we were learning, we were doing what every living species does, and you punished us for it." Had no response to that. He simply gestured toward the waiting shuttle. Took one last look at the darkening skyline. She thought about all the humans who had lived and loved and died in this place. She thought about the dreams that had been born here and the futures that had been planned. All of it gone now. All of it surrendered to satisfy the fears of aliens who had never bothered to understand what humanity truly was. "You will regret this," she said quietly. "Not today, not tomorrow, but you will look back on this moment and understand the mistake you have made. And when that day comes, I hope you remember this conversation. I hope you remember that we warned you." She walked to the shuttle and climbed aboard without another word. The vessel lifted off and carried her away from Earth for the last time. Below her, the planet grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among billions. The Galactic Council celebrated that night. They had solved the human problem without firing a single shot. They had contained the threat and restored order to the galaxy. They congratulated themselves on their wisdom and their restraint. They had no idea that they had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. The problems started small, so small that nobody noticed them at first. A shipping delay here, equipment malfunction there, minor inconveniences that seemed unrelated to the great relocation that had taken place just a few years earlier. But the problems kept growing, they kept spreading, and eventually even the most stubborn members of the Galactic Council could no longer ignore the truth. They were the first to sound the alarm. They had built the jump gates that allowed light travel between star systems. These massive structures were the backbone of galactic civilization. Without them, a journey that took hours would take centuries. They had always been proud of their creation. They considered themselves the masters of jump gate technology. But they had not maintained the gates themselves for over 100 years. That job had been given to a small human engineering company called Stellar Dynamics. The humans had offered the lowest prices and the most reliable service. They had crews stationed at every major gate in the galaxy. They worked around the clock to keep the network running smoothly. And when they were relocated to 7, they took their knowledge with them. Chief engineer of the stood in the control room of the primary jump gate and stared at the flashing warning lights. 3 more gates had failed in the past week. That brought the total to 23 gates offline across the galaxy. Trade routes were being disrupted. Emergency supplies could not reach worlds in crisis. The entire transportation network was slowly falling apart. "I do not understand," said to his team of engineers. "We built these gates, we designed every component, why can we not repair them?" A young named stepped forward nervously. "Sir, I have been studying the maintenance logs. It appears that the humans made modifications to the gate systems over the years, small changes that improved efficiency and reliability, but they never documented these modifications in our records." "Why not?" "Because we never asked them to. We hired them to maintain the gates. We did not ask them to explain their methods. We simply assumed that if something went wrong, they would be there to fix it." Felt a cold sensation spreading through his body. "Can we reverse engineer their modifications?" "We have been trying, sir, but the humans did not think the way we do. Their solutions are creative and unconventional. Some of their modifications seem almost random until you understand the underlying logic. It could take decades to fully comprehend what they did." "We do not have decades. We have months at best before the entire network collapses." They were not alone in their suffering. Across the galaxy, other species were discovering just how dependent they had become on human expertise. They had been buying fertilizer from human manufacturers for generations. It was a simple transaction that nobody questioned. The fertilizer worked, the crops grew, everyone was happy. But when the humans were relocated, the fertilizer shipments stopped. They assumed they could produce the compound themselves. After all, it was just chemicals mixed together in the right proportions. They were wrong. The fertilizer contained engineered microorganisms that the humans had developed specifically for soil. Without these microorganisms, the nutrients could not be absorbed by the plants. Crop yields dropped by 30% in the first year. By the third year, some worlds were facing genuine food shortages. Hai summoned his agricultural ministry for an emergency briefing. The news was not good. "We cannot replicate the microorganisms," the minister reported. "The humans developed them using techniques we do not fully understand. They shared the finished product but not the process. We have samples from our reserves, but they are degrading. Within 5 years we will have nothing left." Closed his eyes and took a deep breath. How did this happen? How did we become so dependent on another species without even realizing it? "Because they were good at what they did," the minister said quietly. "Because they solved problems we did not even know we had. Because they were everywhere, doing everything, and we took them for granted." They faced a different kind of crisis. Their civilization was built on knowledge. They maintained the greatest libraries in the galaxy, containing texts in over 10,000 languages. Scholars from every species came to study in their archives. It was a source of immense pride for the people. But the translation systems that made those archives accessible had been developed by a human company 2 centuries ago. The software was elegant and efficient. It could translate any known language into any other language in real time. It had become so integral to society that nobody remembered how things had worked before it existed. Now the software was failing. Updates that should have been routine were causing crashes. Entire sections of the archive were becoming unreadable, and no matter how hard the programmers worked, they could not figure out how to fix the problems. Ambassador sat in her office and read the latest report with growing despair. She had been one of the loudest voices calling for human relocation. She had argued that humanity was a threat to galactic stability. She had insisted that containing them was the only way to protect the elder races. And now she was watching her own civilization crumble because the humans were no longer there to maintain the systems they had built. There was a knock at her door. A young aide entered with another stack of reports. Ambassador, the medical facilities on Prime are reporting critical shortages. The humans were producing nearly half of our pharmaceutical compounds. Without them, we cannot treat common illnesses. Deaths are increasing across the planet. Put down the report she was holding. Is there any good news, anything at all? The aide hesitated. The council has called an emergency session. All species are experiencing similar problems. There is talk of reaching out to the humans on 7, asking for their help. And what do we offer them in return? What could we possibly give them that would make up for what we did? The aide had no answer, neither did anyone else. In every corner of the galaxy, the same realization was dawning. The humans had not been a threat, they had been a gift. They had woven themselves into the fabric of galactic civilization so thoroughly that removing them was like removing the threads from a tapestry. Everything was unraveling, everything was falling apart, and nobody knew how to stop it. The Galactic Council that had voted unanimously for human relocation now faced a unanimous crisis. They had solved the human problem, and in doing so they had created 1,000 new problems that they could not solve alone. The elder races had lived for millennia. They had built empires and conquered worlds. They had considered themselves wise and powerful and superior. They had been wrong about everything. She remembered standing at the window of the ship and watching Earth grow smaller until it disappeared among the stars. She remembered her mother crying quietly in the seat beside her. She remembered her father straight ahead with a face made of stone. She remembered thinking that her life was over before it had really begun. Now she was 47 years old. She had spent 35 years on this dusty world at the edge of nowhere. She had grown up here, she had married here, she had raised 3 children here. She had built a small repair shop in the settlement of New Haven and spent her days fixing farm equipment and water pumps and anything else that broke down. It was a simple life. It was a quiet life. It was nothing like the life she had imagined for herself when she was young, and the stars had seemed so close. The day the alien shuttle appeared in the sky started like any other day. Lisa was in her shop, working on a broken irrigation valve when she heard the commotion outside. People were shouting and pointing upward. She wiped her hands on her work apron and stepped out into the sunlight. The shuttle was design. Lisa recognized the purple and the curved wings. She had not seen a vessel since the relocation. Nobody had. The aliens had dropped humanity on this rock and then forgotten about them, or so everyone had assumed. The shuttle landed in the town square and a door opened. A female emerged. Her scales were a deep violet and her movements were careful and deliberate. She looked around at the gathered crowd with an expression that might have been nervousness. "I am Ambassador," she announced. "I am here on behalf of the Galactic Council. I wish to speak with your leaders." For a long moment, nobody moved. The humans just stared at this alien who had descended from the sky like a messenger from another world, which, in a way, she was. Lisa pushed through the crowd and stepped forward. "We do not have leaders, not the kind you mean, but I serve on the Community Council. I can speak for this settlement." Studied her for a moment, this human woman in her worn clothes with grease under her fingernails, not what the ambassador had expected. But then, the humans had always been full of surprises. "May we speak privately?" asked. "No," Lisa said flatly. "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of everyone. We have no secrets here. We have nothing to hide." Hesitated, she had prepared a carefully worded speech. She had practiced diplomatic phrases designed to soften the message. But standing here, facing these humans who had every reason to hate her and her kind, the prepared words seemed hollow and false. "Very well," she said, "the galaxy is in crisis. Systems that humans built and maintained are failing everywhere. Trade routes have collapsed, food shortages are spreading, medical facilities cannot function, the jump gate network is falling apart. The Galactic Council has realized that we cannot survive without human help." She paused and took a breath. We made a terrible mistake. We were afraid of you and we let that fear guide our actions. We told ourselves that we were protecting the galaxy from a dangerous species, but we were wrong. You were not dangerous, you were essential, and now we are paying the price for our arrogance." The crowd was silent. Lisa could feel the weight of 100 eyes on her back. Everyone was waiting to see what she would say. "So let me understand," Lisa said slowly. "You imprisoned an entire species because you were scared of us. You took away our homes and our technology and our future. You dumped us on this forgotten world and left us to rot for 35 years, and now you come here asking for help." "Yes," said simply, "that is exactly what we are asking." Lisa laughed. It was a hard sound without any warmth in it. "Why should we help you? Give me one good reason." Opened her mouth to respond, but someone else spoke first. An old man pushed through the crowd. His hair was white and his face was deeply lined. He walked with a cane and his hands trembled slightly, but his eyes were clear and sharp. His name was Gregory Palmer. Before the relocation, he had been one of the most brilliant engineers in human space. He had designed systems that were still running on 100 worlds. He had spent his exile teaching young humans the skills they would need to survive on 7. He was respected by everyone in the settlement. "I will tell you why we should help them," Gregory said. His voice was rough with age, but it carried across the square. "Because that is who we are, that is who we have always been. We are the species that builds things. We are the species that fixes things. We are the species that sees a problem and cannot walk away from it even when walking away would be easier." He turned to face the crowd. "Yes, they treated us badly. Yes, they were cruel and foolish and wrong. But if we refuse to help them now, if we let the galaxy burn because our feelings are hurt, then we become something less than human. We become exactly what they feared we were: cold, vengeful, dangerous." "They do not deserve our forgiveness," someone shouted from the crowd. "Forgiveness is not about what they deserve," Gregory replied. "Forgiveness is about who we choose to be. I choose to be the kind of person who helps when help is needed, even if the people asking do not deserve it, especially then." Lisa stood quietly for a long moment. She thought about her children. Her daughter was 23 now. She had been born on this world and had never seen the stars. She had never walked the streets of a human city or visited the libraries of Earth or looked up at a sky filled with ships. That future had been stolen from her before she was even born. But it did not have to stay stolen. If they helped the galaxy now, they could win back everything that had been taken, not through force, not through war, through simply being who they had always been. "We will help you," Lisa said finally, "but not as servants, not as tools to be used and discarded when you are done with us. If we come back as equals, full citizenship, full rights, a seat on the Galactic Council itself, nothing less." Slowly, "The Council has authorized me to offer exactly those terms. Humanity will be welcomed back as a full member of the galactic community. Your worlds will be returned. Your technology will be restored. You will have a voice in all decisions that affect the galaxy." "Then we have a deal," Lisa said. She reached out her hand, looked at it for a moment, uncertain. Then she extended her own scaled hand and clasped the human's fingers. It was an awkward gesture, did not shake hands, but it felt right somehow. It felt like a beginning. "The ships will start arriving tomorrow," said. "Anyone who wishes to leave 7 will be transporting to wherever they want to go. There is much work to be done." "Lisa, we know. We have been waiting 35 years to do it." The crowd began to disperse. People headed home to pack their belongings and say their goodbyes. After 3.5 decades, they were finally going back to the stars. Gregory Palmer remained in the square. He leaned on his cane and watched the shuttle sitting in the dust. He was too old to do much rebuilding himself. His hands shook too badly to hold tools, but he had taught a whole generation of young engineers. They would do the work that he could not. "We did it," he said softly to himself. "We survived, and now we get to show them what we are really made of." Above him, the stars were coming out. After so many years of looking up at them with longing, he would finally get to walk among them again. It was going to be quite a journey. The galaxy had expected humans to return with fire in their eyes and hatred in their hearts. They had expected demands for revenge. They had expected accusations and recriminations. They had prepared themselves for anger that would burn for generations. What they received instead was something that confused them far more deeply. The humans came back smiling. Webb arrived at the primary jump gate 3 weeks after the return began. He was 41 years old with calloused hands and an easy laugh. He had been born on 7 and had grown up hearing stories about the wonders of galactic civilization. Now he was finally getting to see those wonders for himself, and also to fix them. The engineers watched nervously as and his team unloaded their equipment. They did not know what to expect from these humans. Would they be hostile? Would they refuse to share their knowledge? Would they demand payment or promises before they agreed to help? Walked up to the chief engineer and stuck out his hand. "Hey there, heard you folks are having some trouble with your gate systems. Mind if I take a look?" The whose name was stared at the offered hand in confusion. After a moment, lowered it and shrugged. "Right, different customs, my apologies, so where are we having problems?" Led him into the control room and showed him the cascading error messages. The gate had been offline for 2 months. Ships were backed up for light years waiting to pass through. They had tried everything they could think of, but nothing worked. Studied the readouts for several minutes. He asked questions about the maintenance history. He crawled under consoles and traced wiring. He ran diagnostic that they had never seen before. Then he stood up and stretched his back. "Found your problem. The resonance harmonics are off by a tiny fraction. That is cascading through the whole system and causing everything else to fail. Give me about 6 hours and I can have this gate running better than new." Blinked his large eyes. "That is all, just the harmonics?" "Well, there are about a dozen other small issues I noticed while I was poking around. But yeah, the harmonics are the main thing. Once we fix that, everything else should fall into place." "How did we miss something so simple?" Smiled. "It is not simple if you do not know what to look for. Your engineers are brilliant. They designed this whole system from scratch, but I think like a human. Sometimes you need a different perspective to see the obvious." He and his team got to work. They did not complain about the years of exile. They did not demand apologies or extra compensation. They did not lecture thee about justice or fairness. They just fixed the gate. 6 hours later, the jump gate back to life. The first ship passed through to cheering crowds on both sides, watched with something that might have been wonder. "I do not understand," he said to, "We imprisoned your people. We took everything from you. Why are you helping us as if none of that happened?" Thought about the question for a moment. Because holding on to anger is exhausting. Because revenge would not give us back the years we lost. Because my parents taught me that you judge people by what they do, not what they did. You made a mistake. Now you are trying to make it right. That is all any of us can do. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human doctors arrived at medical facilities and immediately got to work. Human farmers taught alien species how to cultivate their own engineered crops. Human programmers dove into failing systems and brought them back online. Human traders reopened routes that had been closed for years. Everywhere they went, the humans worked with an enthusiasm that the elder races found almost disturbing. Dr. Price landed on Prime with a team of agricultural specialists. The food shortages had gotten severe. Entire regions were facing starvation. The government had been rationing supplies for months. And her team studied the soil samples and the failing crops. They analyzed the degrading microorganisms and compared them to their records from before the relocation. Within 3 weeks, they had not only replicated the original fertilizer compound but improved it. Hai visited their laboratory to see the results for himself. The new crops were taller and healthier than anything that had grown in decades. "This is remarkable," he said, "but I must ask, why did you make it better? We only asked you to restore what we had." Looked up from her work and shrugged. "Because better was possible. We saw ways to improve the formula, so we improved it. Why would we do less than our best?" Did not have an answer for that. A philosopher named wrote an essay that spread across the galaxy. He called it the human paradox. "We imprisoned them because we feared their ambition," he wrote. "We believed they wanted to conquer us, to dominate us, to reduce us to servants of their expanding empire. We were certain that their rapid growth was a sign of aggression. We could not imagine any other explanation, but we were wrong. Humans do not want to rule, they want to build, they want to fix, they want to help. Their ambition is not for power but for purpose. They spread across the galaxy not to conquer but to connect. We looked at them and saw a threat. We should have looked and seen a gift." Not all humans were happy about the return. There were protests on some worlds. Some demanded reparations for the years of exile. Others called for isolation, that humans should build their own civilization separate from the species that had betrayed them. A small faction even advocated for revenge, for using the galaxy's dependence on human expertise as leverage to punish those who had voted for relocation. But these voices were in the minority. Most humans seemed to agree with the philosophy that Gregory Palmer had expressed on Seven. They helped because helping was who they were. They forgave not because the aliens deserved forgiveness, but because holding onto bitterness would poison their own souls. Lisa Carter, now serving as the first human representative on the Galactic Council, addressed the full assembly 1 year after the return. "Many of you expected us to hate you," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "Many of you thought we would demand punishment for those who voted against us. Some of you probably lie awake at night wondering when we will take our revenge. Let me put those fears to rest. We are not here for revenge. We are not here for punishment. We are here to build a future, together. She paused and looked around the chamber at the representatives of 100 different species. You made a choice based on fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of a species that did things differently than you. That fear led you to make a terrible mistake, but fear is not the same as malice. You were not evil, you were scared, and scared people do stupid things sometimes. A few of the alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. We could hold that against you forever. We could use our expertise as a weapon and force you to beg for every scrap of help. We could make you pay and pay and pay for what you did, but what would that accomplish? It would not give us back the 35 years we lost. It would not heal the wounds we carry. It would only create new wounds, new resentments, new reasons for conflict. She spread her hands. So we choose differently. We choose to show you who humanity really is, not the threat you imagined but the partner you never knew you needed. We choose to build instead of destroy, to heal instead of harm, to forgive instead of condemn, not because you deserve it but because we do, because that is the kind of species we want to be. The chamber was silent for a long moment, then slowly applause began. It started with the delegation, then the joined in, then within moments the entire assembly was applauding. Lisa allowed herself a small smile. They still had a long way to go. Trust would take time to rebuild. Old suspicions would not disappear overnight, but this was a start. This was a foundation they could build on. Outside the chamber, the stars shone bright and clear. Somewhere out there, human ships were traveling to every corner of the galaxy, fixing things, building things, helping in ways large and small, one world at a time, one problem at a time, one handshake at a time. The rebuilding had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. 50 years had passed since the return. The galaxy that existed now would have been unrecognizable to anyone who had lived through the dark times of the unraveling. Everything had changed. Everything had grown. Everything had become something new and better and full of possibility. Webb stood at the window of her office and looked out at the city of New Chicago. The skyline glittered with lights from 1,000 buildings. Flying vehicles moved through the air like schools of fish. In the distance, she could see the spaceport where ships from 100 worlds arrived every hour. The city was alive in a way that her grandfather had only dreamed about during his long years of exile. Was 32 years old. Her father had told her stories about 7 when she was young, about the dusty settlements and the endless waiting, about the hope that never quite died no matter how hard the years became. She had grown up knowing that her family had suffered greatly, but she had also grown up in a galaxy that was healing. Today was an important day. Served as the human ambassador to the Galactic Council, she had been working for months on a proposal that would change everything. Now it was time to present it. The council chamber was full when she arrived. Representatives from every known species filled the circular room, and sat alongside newer members who had only recently joined galactic civilization. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation. Everyone knew that the human ambassador was about to propose something big. Walked to the central podium and looked around at the assembled faces. Some were friendly, some were curious. A few still held traces of the old suspicion that had never quite faded. She took a deep breath and began to speak. For too long, this galaxy has operated on fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of species that think differently or act differently or dream differently. That fear led to the imprisonment of my people 50 years ago, but it has led to countless other injustices as well. Wars fought over misunderstandings, trade embargoes imposed because of prejudice, entire civilizations isolated simply because they were strange to us. She paused to let the words sink in. My people have spent the last half-century helping to rebuild this galaxy. We have fixed your machines and healed your sick and taught your children. We have done this not for payment or praise, but because it is who we are, because we believe that building is better than destroying, that connection is better than isolation, that hope is better than fear. The chamber was completely silent. Every eye was fixed on the human woman at the podium. Now I am asking you to take the next step. Humanity proposes the Accords, a new framework for interstellar relations based not on fear but on cooperation, not on containment but on welcome. Under these accords, every species, no matter how new or how different, will be welcomed into the galactic community. Every voice will be heard, every gift will be valued. No one will ever again face what humanity faced. No one will ever be cast out simply for growing too fast or dreaming too big. A murmur ran through the chamber. This was radical. This went against thousands of years of galactic tradition. The elder races had always controlled who was allowed to join their civilization. They had always been the gatekeepers. What was proposing would change the fundamental nature of the council itself. I know this is frightening, continued. I know that opening our doors means taking risks, Some of the species we welcome may turn out to be problematic, some may cause trouble, some may challenge us in ways we do not expect, but the alternative is worse. The alternative is a galaxy trapped in amber, a galaxy that never changes because it is too afraid to try, a galaxy that repeats the same mistakes over and over because it cannot imagine doing things differently. She thought about her grandfather Gregory, who had died 10 years ago at the age of 93. She thought about all the humans who had spent their best years on Seven, waiting for a chance that almost never came. She thought about what might have been lost if the galaxy had not realized its mistake in time. My people were almost erased from history because you were scared of us. Think about that. Think about what the galaxy would look like right now if humanity had been destroyed instead of relocated. Think about all the problems that would have gone unsolved, all the connections that would never have been made, all the futures that would have been lost. And then ask yourself how many other species you might be making the same mistake about right now. The debate lasted for 3 days. There were objections and amendments and heated arguments. Some species worried that the accords would lead to chaos. Others feared that their own power and influence would be diminished. A few simply could not let go of the fear that had shaped their thinking for so long. But in the end, the vote was not even close. The accords passed with the largest majority in council history. Ambassador cast the deciding vote. She was very old now. Her scales had faded to pale lavender and she moved slowly, but her mind was still sharp and her voice was still strong. I have lived long enough to see my own prejudices proven wrong, she said to the chamber. I was one of those who called loudest for human relocation. I truly believed that we were protecting ourselves from a dangerous species. I was a fool. The humans have shown me what courage really looks like, what forgiveness really looks like, what wisdom really looks like. If they can forgive us after everything we did to them, then surely we can learn to trust species we have not yet met. On the anniversary of the return, a memorial was dedicated on Earth. The site was a garden planted with species from 1,000 worlds, surrounding a single stone pillar. Billions watched the ceremony as it was broadcast to every inhabited planet. Webb gave the dedication speech. Her father was there, old now but still sharp. Lisa Carter watched from a hover chair, her hair white and her face lined with 97 years of living. Gregory Palmer had not lived to see this day, but his spirit was present in every word his granddaughter spoke. They thought they were protecting themselves from us, said. They thought that by sending us away they would make the galaxy safer. Instead, they taught us who we really are. They taught us that we could endure anything, forgive anything, overcome anything. They gave us 35 years of exile, and in return we gave them a future. She looked out at the crowd. Humans and aliens stood side by side. Children of every species played together on the grass. It was exactly the kind of scene that would have been impossible before the return. This memorial is not about blame. It is not about keeping old wounds fresh. It is about remembering what fear can do when we let it guide us, remembering what forgiveness can achieve when we have the courage to offer it, remembering that every species, no matter how strange or new or different, deserves a chance to show what they can become. She touched the stone pillar. The words carved into it had been translated into every known language. The human version read, "We were sent away in fear. We returned in hope. Let this remind us that the galaxy's greatest strength is not in any single species, but in what we build together." My grandfather used to tell me that the measure of a species is not how it treats its friends, but how it treats those who have wronged it. By that measure, I believe humanity has proven worthy of the stars, not because we are stronger or smarter or better than anyone else, but because we chose to be kind when cruelty would have been easier. We chose to build when destruction would have been. We chose to hope when despair would have been understandable. The sun was setting over the garden. The light painted everything in shades of gold and orange. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed. They made a mistake when they sent us away, but in the end they made an even bigger choice. They chose to ask for our help. They chose to admit they were wrong. They chose to give us a second chance, and we chose to take it. She smiled and spread her hands to encompass the entire gathering. This is what that choice created. This garden, this memorial, this galaxy where any species can find a home, this future where fear no longer rules. We built this together, all of us, human and alien alike. And as long as we remember that, as long as we keep building together, there is nothing we cannot achieve. The applause began softly and grew until it filled the air. It spread through the broadcast and echoed across the stars. In quiet corners of the galaxy, young beings of every species looked up at the sky and imagined the wonders that awaited them. The universe had never seemed so full of possibility. The humans had not conquered the galaxy. They had not demanded power or worship or submission. They had simply shown everyone a better way to live, and in doing so they had changed everything forever. That was their legacy, that was their gift, that was what it meant to be human. And it was only the beginning.